I'll paraphrase and translate this military analysis text for you. English translation, paraphrased. Hello everyone, this is Ruslan Beylov's channel, and today we'll analyze the Ukrainian situation as of November 26, 2025. Several significant developments occurred today, so let's begin. Western media outlets are actively reporting that Ukraine, along with France, the United Kingdom, and other Western nations, have accepted Trump's plan. They view this proposal as a reasonable foundation for negotiations, though some adjustments may be necessary. Now let's turn our attention to the front lines. Let's examine why the American side is pressuring Kyiv to sign a peace agreement with Russia immediately. Not in 3 or 4 months, certainly not in a year, but right now. The answer likely lies not in the Pokrovsk direction, nor in the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk sector, nor in Kupiansk. Instead, the answer appears to be in the Zaporizhzhia region, where 2 Russian armed forces groups, the Dnipro and Vostok formations, are continuing their Zaporizhzhia offensive. What's happening there? Russian units are engaging Ukrainian forces around Stepnogorsk and Orikhiv, conducting regular raids from south to north to pin down Ukrainian formations and prevent reinforcement transfers to other sectors. Russian troops are actively operating here, keeping Ukrainian forces occupied. The main offensive is unfolding in the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, now called the Huliai-Pol direction. However, given how the situation is developing, this sector may soon need renaming, as Huliai-Pol will likely come under Russian armed forces control in the near future. Pro-Russian analysts are reporting today that Ukraine has begun rapidly concentrating all available resources and reserves specifically to the Zaporizhzhia sector. Information indicates the redeployment of the 154th Mechanized, 92nd Assault, 2nd Battalion of the 5th Assault Brigade, and 3rd Battalion of the separate Presidential Brigade. Ukraine is accumulating substantial forces here with one objective: holding the front line along the Hychel River, the P85 highway, and the network of strongpoints stretching from Pokrovsk to Huliai-Pol. This Zaporizhzhia wall is the key defensive line for Ukrainian armed forces across the entire Zaporizhzhia direction. When we discuss the Zaporizhzhia direction now, we're not talking about Zaporizhzhia Oblast per se, but about the city of Zaporizhzhia itself, located on the Dnipro River. Ukrainian forces must hold this line at any cost, according to general understanding, and apparently American understanding as well. If Ukraine loses control of the P85 highway and the strongpoint network, and if Russian forces advance beyond this line westward, we may begin a countdown for the city of Zaporizhzhia. Moreover, Ukrainian forces won't be able to hold Zaporizhzhia under any circumstances. What's the current situation? Russian units are actively advancing toward Huliai-Pol and other settlements along the P85 highway. Today, certain Telegram channels associated with the Vostok group report that Russian forces have entered the eastern outskirts of Dobropilya, another small village along the P85 highway, on the route from Pokrovsk toward Huliai-Pol. Russian units are also actively striking Ukrainian armed forces positions around Vavarivka, located slightly north of Huliai-Pol. Footage shows TOS Solntsepiok flamethrower system strikes in this area, and of course Huliai-Pol itself. As you can see, the map in this direction has undergone substantial changes. Yesterday's map showed initial reports that Russian forces had improved their positions east and northeast of Huliai-Pol. But today, initial data suggests Russian forces have entered and established positions within Huliai-Pol on the Ukrainian side of the Hychel River. Various pro-Russian analysts are proposing such corrections today. This represents urban combat. Regarding Huliai-Pol itself, numerous geolocations from the past 24 hours show Russia delivering massive aerial bombing strikes against Ukrainian armed forces positions. The intensity of strikes, the quantity of aviation, equipment and artillery employed, indicates one objective for Russian units: rapidly clearing Huliai-Pol. Not advancing there over months, but quickly. The essence of this quickly is that while Russian units assault this Zaporizhzhia wall, Ukrainian units are desperately trying to construct new defensive lines between the P85 highway and Zaporizhzhia. Therefore, rapidly clearing Huliai-Pol and reaching strongpoints between Huliai-Pol and Orikhiv would allow Russian forces to disrupt Ukrainian plans for establishing defensive positions here. Let's speculate. What happens if Ukrainian forces cannot hold the P-85 highway, the Hychel River, and all these strongpoints? If Russian units break through defenses in this sector and establish a bridgehead on the Ukrainian side of the river, if Russian units reach approximately this red line, the distance from potential Russian armed forces forward positions to Zaporizhzhia would be 63 kilometers. This is actually a very short distance, considering that between these positions and the settlement, there are virtually no powerful fortified areas like we observe around Orikhiv. Notice how every square kilometer is excavated, or defensive lines like those around Velika Novosilka, Vuhledar, Kurakove, or what we see in the Pokrovsk sector. Such defensive structures don't exist here. Those being constructed apparently haven't been fully coordinated yet. But 63 kilometers is still a distance. The question is, does the Russian army need to traverse all 63 kilometers? Of course not. We must understand that approximately 30 kilometers before reaching Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine would be forced to announce evacuation. Once Russian units cover approximately 30 kilometers across essentially open terrain, Ukrainian authorities would be obligated to begin complete evacuation of all civilians, industry, everything from Zaporizhzhia. When Russian forces reach approximately 15 kilometers from Zaporizhzhia, the capitulation distance begins. This is the distance from which Ukraine could no longer ensure supply of the Zaporizhzhia garrison without losses and problems. Moreover, Zaporizhzhia differs from all other settlements along the contact line. Its crucial distinction and advantage for Russian forces is that Zaporizhzhia sits on the Russian-controlled side of the Dnipro River, or rather, its larger main portion does. Once Russian units reach the capitulation line, these 15 kilometers, complete control over all supply routes, including the Dnipro River, would be established. Using the Dnipro River and bridges would become unsafe and impossible. Understanding that Zaporizhzhia is a city of several 100,000, such a blockade would be impossible to endure without complete civilian evacuation. Even with evacuation, holding Zaporizhzhia would require Ukraine to supply tens of thousands of troops across the Dnipro River, which would be simply impossible. The situation in Zaporizhzhia could repeat what happened to Russian forces in 2022, when Russian units remained blocked in Kherson after the Antonivsky Bridge's destruction. At the critical moment, Russian command decided to withdraw the entire group from the Ukrainian side to the Russian side to avoid losing them. Yes, Ukrainians might not make such a decision and instead choose to fight to the end, but the price would be extremely high. Americans understand perfectly that losing neither Pokrovsk, nor Siversk, nor Sloviansk, nor Kramatorsk would inflict such serious damage to Ukrainian statehood as losing Zaporizhzhia, whose agglomeration numbers 1 million people. Regarding the western bank, Russian units would struggle to cross. But for the eastern part, there are probably no questions for anyone, except perhaps Zelensky and Syrsky have some plans and ideas, though they're likely impossible to implement. Returning to timeframes, why are Americans rushing? Because Russian units covered the distance from Velika Novosilka to the P-85 highway, fully excavated with strongpoints, with a relatively fresh Ukrainian army, in about 5 to 6 months. The distance here is even greater, 46 kilometers from Velika Novosilka to the river. The distance from the P-85 highway to the evacuation point, 32 kilometers, could actually be covered in 3 to 4 months, possibly even faster. Everything depends on numerous factors, including how Western Ukrainian partners managed to slow the offensive tempo through all these impossible, conceivable and inconceivable negotiations. But if Russia maintains its position, we could see Russian units at the evacuation point by early March 2026. Zaporizhzhia could actually fall closer to summer 2026. This could lead to collapse not only of Zaporizhzhia Oblast itself, but structures standing far above just the oblast level. And of course, no one wants to allow this. Next, we move to the Pokrovsk sector, where fierce fighting continues. This is another mistake Ukrainian forces and command are making. Today, thousands, if not tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are concentrated around Pokrovsk. Both sides suffer losses, Russian and Ukrainian. But all these resources and reserves, instead of these possibly pointless battles for already lost cities and agglomeration, could be doing something on the Zaporizhzhia sector. but all these resources were left around Pokrovsk. As you can see, corrections have been noted over the past day, including corrections in favor of Ukrainian armed forces. The map looked like this on November 25, 2025. Notice the numerous grey zones and territories covered by fog of war around Pokrovsk. Today, all these corrections are being removed in favor of Ukrainian armed forces, because despite claims by individual mapmakers, we haven't received reliable proof that all territories previously marked as grey zone were under Russian control. Today, several reliable pro-Russian mapmakers and analysts who previously colored territory in favor of Russia have reversed these colorings. Accordingly, we've also made corrections. According to the latest map version, Ukrainian units control territory west of Pokrovsk, between Serhivka and Hryshin. This isn't surprising, as yesterday we discussed footage. We couldn't determine if it was archival or fresh, showing Ukrainian units calmly entering northwestern Pokrovsk. Today we see corrections in this area. Information also indicates clearing operations in Pokrovsk, north of the Hryshinka River, a small stream, and apparently the private sector remains under Ukrainian control. The main corrections today come from territory between Pokrovsk and Rodinska. Corrections here are based on various reliable pro-Russian sources and Ukrainian published video footage showing Ukrainian SOF units entering Pokrovsk territory and conducting clearing operations in November, obviously November based on weather. There's understanding that most likely the northern part of Pokrovsk and part of the northernmost citadel constitute a grey zone where meeting engagements continue. We also understand Ukraine has repeatedly attempted to break through some corridor to Myrnohrad to begin evacuating Ukrainian units from the city. Meanwhile, Russian forces continue tightening the vice around Myrnohrad. Today, the map undergoes serious changes confirmed indirectly by Russia's Ministry of Defense. Regarding Myrnohrad, reports indicate completion of fighting for the southern part and southern districts. Reports also indicate completion of combat operations in the eastern part, western and eastern districts of Myrnohrad. Ukrainian forces are being squeezed near the reservoirs in the central part, with all possible evacuation routes being cut to surround remaining garrison forces. There's also footage with corrections today. We colored eastern Myrnohrad in favor of Russian armed forces. A fairly large territory. These corrections were based on video material from near City Pond No. 2. The footage, published today by Ukrainian sources, shows meeting engagement between Russian and Ukrainian units at this point, resulting in several Russian soldiers captured, according to the video's author. We assume territory to the east is likely already under Russian control. Despite Ukrainian attempts to somehow maintain the vice and corridor from Myrnohrad to Hryshin, Russian units are completing encirclement of Ukrainian groupings in Myrnohrad, cutting it off from all supply routes and evacuation lines. On other front sectors, today without major changes. Ukrainian sources confirm difficult situations around Siversk. Moreover, at least 25% of Siversk is now marked as grey zone by pro-Ukrainian mapmakers. In the Kupiansk direction, no changes. Fighting continues for Kupiansk, Vuzlovyi, Kurilivka, Podoli. Ukraine regularly establishes, then loses crossings near the Oskil River, which are destroyed immediately upon reinstallation. In northeastern Kharkiv Oblast, no changes. Russian units are advancing around Chihelne and Sinelnikova, with several videos confirming confident Russian control in this sector today. That's all, dear friends. Thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and all the best to you.